Freezeezy Peak, Waz's Cave. You're 9 years old, you've got a bear and a bird, and there is a key frozen inside a block of ice. You can go into first-person view and look right at it. It turns, slowly, like it's waiting for you. And you can never have it. Not by playing well, not by finding a secret, not with 100% completion. On the Nintendo 64, in the cartridge that is probably still in your parents' loft, that key cannot be picked up by anybody. Every kid who played this game found that key, and every kid had a theory. All of us were wrong. And the real answer involves a patent, a stopwatch, and a company keeping a secret from Nintendo. So, Banjo-Kazooie. Everybody remembers it as the cozy one. The warm N64 platformer with the honeycomb and the jiggies and the music you still know by heart. It is also, genuinely, one of the strangest games ever made by a major studio. A shaman turns you into a termite, the final boss is a quiz show, and buried in it is a secret so ambitious they patented it, hid it, and then lost it. This is the weird world of Banjo-Kazooie. And the thread running through all of it is the same one. This game is absolutely full of things you're allowed to see and never allowed to have. First, you have to understand what Rare actually were in the 90s, and the honest answer is unsupervised. Banjo-Kazooie didn't start as Banjo-Kazooie. It started as a huge role-playing game called Dream, and it began life on the Super Nintendo before moving over to the N64 mid-build. The hero wasn't a bear. He was a boy called Edson, he had a pet called Dinger, and the villains were pirates led by a fellow named Captain Blackeye. The team were, in their own words, massive Zelda fans, and it got away from them. In Rare's own documentary, they admit the scope was so large they couldn't see any end in sight. And the way they solved it is the most rare sentence ever recorded. On camera, in their own retrospective, they remember it as, "Get rid of this guy. Let's get an animal in there. A bear. We're having a bear." They tried a rabbit first, and one of the people who made it is still not over it 20 years later. "Should have been a rabbit," he says. "It would have been Bunny-Kazooie or something." So that's the studio. Now the game they made with it. Mumbo Jumbo, the shaman with the skull mask, turns you into things. A termite, a pumpkin, a walrus, a crocodile, a bee. Nobody made them do that. Somebody sat in a meeting and said, "What if the bear was a bee?" And everyone said yes. And when Mumbo casts the spell, he says a magic word. Eekum-Bokum. You've said it out loud. Everyone who played this game has said it out loud. Here's what it actually is. It's Grant Kirkhope's voice saying the words, "Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough." The football terrace chant, chopped up and rebuilt. That's it. That's the ancient magic of Mumbo Jumbo, a bloke doing a football chant into a microphone. And we know because Kirkhope says so, on camera, in Rare's own documentary. Then there's Gruntilda, the witch. She speaks in rhyme, almost the whole game. Not just for a boss fight, not just the big moments. Nearly everything she says to you rhymes. And I want to tell you who wrote them. I can't. I went looking properly. Rare's own documentaries never bring it up, no interview I could find names the person, and the writers credited on the sequel are a different team on a different game. So somebody at Rare wrote hundreds of rhyming couplets for a witch, and, as far as I can tell, has never once been publicly credited for it. And then the ending, because after all of that, after every jiggy and every note, the final challenge in Banjo-Kazooie is a game show, an actual quiz. Gruntilda makes you sit down and answer questions about the game you have just finished playing. What did this room look like? What noise did that thing make? You're being tested on whether you were paying attention, which is basically what this whole video is. And one more, because this one tells you exactly who these people were. In the sequel, there's a racing bird called Canary Mary, and every single person who played it came away convinced she cheats. In 2001, a player wrote into Rare's own question and answer column to say so. He had built a physical autofire machine to beat her. He called it the Canary Mary Destroyer. Rare's answer from one of the programmers? Come on, it is the last level. It's supposed to be difficult. Deflected. 4 years later, Rare ran a competition on their own website. First question, marked easy. Does Canary Mary cheat in Banjo-Tooie's Cloud Cuckoo Land race? They were now treating it as general knowledge. February 2006, in that same column, a reader wrote in arguing that a giraffe could beat her, and one of Rare's designers finally said it out loud. No one can beat Canary Mary in less than 13 seconds, not even a giraffe, as she cheats and adapts her speed to match the player's skill. If you play too well, she always seems to win. We never did fix that one properly. 5 years. A player accuses the game of cheating and builds a machine to prove it. Rare laughs it off, and then they quietly admit he was right. All of it in public, on their own website, where they talk to us like we were mates. Hold on to that website. It matters later. Because there's something in Banjo-Kazooie almost nobody has ever seen. 6 colored eggs and a key. 7 items sitting in the code that the game already knows about, and on an N64, there is no way to get any of them. And then the game does something genuinely cruel. When you beat it, Mumbo shows you photographs, snapshots of secrets, places and things you never found. On the way out, it shows you what you missed, and then it stops. So what were they for? The answer is called Stop and Swap, and it's one of the maddest ideas a studio has ever actually tried. You were meant to turn your Nintendo 64 off, not pause it, off. Then pull the Banjo-Kazooie cartridge out, put a different game in, and turn it back on, and the second game would know what the first one had left behind. The idea came from 80s home computers, where cutting the power didn't wipe the screen memory instantly. The N64 had the same quirk, and Rare noticed. And it wasn't 2 games. The plan was at least 6. Banjo-Kazooie into Donkey Kong 64 into Banjo-Tooie into the Conquer game as it existed back then, Jet Force Gemini, Perfect Dark, a chain of cartridges passing secrets down the line. Ice Key, the one in the ice you can see and can't have, was meant to be the end of the chain. The engineer who came up with it wondered aloud whether, if you got all 6, the last game could send something back to the first one. Full circle. Now, everybody who has ever repeated this story tells you the same ending, that it was too ambitious, that the N64 couldn't hold the data, that it was a lovely idea that physics said no to. That's wrong. And I want to be careful here because everyone gets this bit wrong, including me, until I read the source. The man who built it is called Paul Makachek. He wrote Banjo-Kazooie's memory system, and in an interview in 2020, he explains exactly how it worked, and it's beautiful. Every single frame of the game, the entire time you were playing, Banjo-Kazooie was quietly writing a small packet of data into every scrap of free memory it could find. 64 bytes, 1 byte of actual message, and 63 bytes of error checking, because it didn't need all of them to survive the power cut. It needed one. One uncorrupted copy, anywhere in the memory, and the trick worked. So how long did it survive? He tested it, with a stopwatch, cutting the power for longer and longer and checking whether the message made it. 23 seconds, reliably. You could unplug a Nintendo 64, wait 23 seconds, plug it back in, and the data was still there. And Rare weren't even going to tell you that. They were going to publish a safe number, 10 seconds, maybe even 5, because 5 felt sensible for customers. So if you grew up hearing that the swap window was 10 seconds, that number is real. It just wasn't the limit. It was the safety margin. And they weren't messing about either. There is a patent, filed in June 1999, granted in 2004. It's called System Method and Data Storage Medium for Sharing Data Between Video Games, and the inventors listed on it are Tim Stamper and Paul Makachek. The patent itself even spells out the difference between hot swapping, with the console on, and cold swapping with it off. This was not a rumor, it was engineering, and they filed the paperwork. So why has nobody ever done it? Well, there's a detail in Rare's own documentary that I think changes the whole story, and I've not seen anyone make much of it. Chris Sutherland, who was on the team, says this on camera. Unfortunately, we didn't tell Nintendo, because we didn't think they'd really need to know until towards the end. Read that again. They built a secret feature spanning 6 cartridges on Nintendo's console, going through Nintendo's approval process, and they decided Nintendo didn't need to know yet. Which is completely in character for the studio that turned you into a bee and made its final boss a quiz show. It's also a gamble, and gambles get called in. October 1999, Donkey Kong 64 is going through approval, and Nintendo find out what Stop and Swap is. They said no. And the reason matters because it isn't the reason you've heard. In Makachek's account, the objection wasn't that it had failed, it was about the future. As the N64 aged, they'd redesign the circuit board to make it cheaper to manufacture, and those changes might make the memory drain faster, and then players would find a feature that was broken or unreliable. That's a hypothetical. A working feature, tested at 23 seconds, killed by a concern about consoles that hadn't been built yet. Nintendo's message set out 3 concerns and suggested alternatives instead. I'd love to tell you what all 3 were. That email is public now, and I haven't read it, so I'm not going to guess. Donkey Kong 64 shipped about a month later without it, and the chain never linked. Here's the part that gets me, though. Rare kept promising it anyway. On their own website, by late 1998, there was a Banjo-Kazooie question page, and someone asked how to reach the secret stuff Mumbo shows you at the end. Rare's answer, in writing, all the secret stuff can only be reached when playing Banjo-Tooie, the planned, and naturally better, sequel to Banjo-Kazooie. Whilst playing Tooie, you'll be able to come back to Kazooie and grab the hidden goodies, before spiriting them away into the sequel, where they will be put to good use. And on the same page, someone asked about the ice key, because by then the internet was absolutely drowning in fake methods for getting it. Rare's actual published answer. Contrary to the many hilarious and completely inaccurate methods that are circulating the net like a swarm of disease-ridden lying mosquitoes, there is no genuine way of getting this key until Banjo-Tooie makes its appearance. Disease-ridden lying mosquitoes. That's Rare, in 1998, on their own official website, roasting the fake code scene. And when someone asked how the swap would actually work, they refused to say, because it would spoil the surprise. And by autumn 1999, they were still teasing it. Still saying, keep on guessing, all will be revealed. In the same month the feature was being killed. They also, quietly, built a trapdoor. The team wrote a set of long comedy cheat phrases that would unlock the items directly, in case the system ever failed. Rare never published them. They were never meant to be used. Players cracked them open anyway, a couple of years later. So the only way anyone has ever finished Stop and Swap on a Nintendo 64 is by typing in an emergency code the studio wrote and hoped it would never need. Which is not the same as completing it. Nobody has ever done that the way it was meant to be done, and then the ending nobody plans for. In 2002, Microsoft bought Rare, and in late 2008, on an Xbox, Stop and Swap finally switched on. The eggs work, the key works. It's in Rare Replay now, so you can do it today. The feature Nintendo stopped was finished after Rare no longer worked for Nintendo. And that patent, the one with Stamper and Makachek's names on it, the company listed on it now is Microsoft. It followed them across. So the ice key was never really a key to anything. It was a promise, made by a studio that still believed it could do whatever it liked, to a bunch of kids who were absolutely going to spend the next decade trying to reach it. We were right to keep trying. It was real the whole time.
I wonder what we can do with it.
Tell me in the comments, what was your ice key? The thing in a game you were convinced you could reach that you never could. Next file on the shelf, a pink puffball who can eat anything, and the reason he's angry on the American box art. Same couch, same bowl. Keep guessing.